So as a mom, you just have to take a step back sometimes and be like, it's okay. I'm moving a little slower. I still have my goals. Maybe I didn't reach all of them this month or this quarter, but I'll make up for it next quarter or next month. And that's okay.
Welcome, everyone, to the Quiet Wealth Podcast. So excited to have you here. And I'm super excited today to have my good friend, Christine Hsu, on the show. Christine, I'm so excited to have you here. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Christine. So she started her career as an R&D food scientist. So that's super cool. But 13 years into it, she realized the freedom that real estate brought to her and her family, and she pursued that direction full time in 2020. So she currently owns 6 rental properties in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Westchester, New York. She's a JV partner on 2 deals across 32 units in the Carolinas. And she also invests as a passive investor in over 1,000 multifamily and mobile home park syndications and funds. So she lives in White Plains, New York with her husband and 2 adorable boys. So, Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yay.
Yeah, Christine and I have worked together, and I just love always connecting with other women in real estate and other women who are pursuing big goals and dreams. So first off, Christine, I like to ask my guests, really, what is your definition of wealth? Because there's so many different definitions out there. And I think when I first heard the term wealth, I kind of had an adverse reaction to the actual term wealth, because I was like, oh, well, that's not a noble thing to pursue. But I've since learned that there's actually many definitions of wealth. So I'd love to hear what you think wealth is.
Yes, I am on that same page as you because I feel like before, even growing up, when I heard the word wealthy or wealth, if I closed my eyes and just imagined, who that would be, who is a wealthy person? I mean, I saw someone who was driving fancy cars, living in a huge mansion, probably like not super nice, like you said, negative connotation, someone who like really hustled hard at any cost to, make more money kind of thing. Big yachts, maybe a private jet, all that stuff. It's like stuff focused, right? Things, luxury items. But then probably similar to you, just, as we got older, or as I got older, at least the definition of wealth, especially being in this industry and just being amongst actually wealthy people who are different from that. Like, I don't know, my definition of wealth completely changed. And it's all about having time freedom. And that's so critical, being a mom, especially because we need that time freedom. I feel like our days are just so filled up with so many things. We're literally juggling like the world in our hands, not just our own, but our children and just our family, our husbands. And if we're working, there's all of that to juggle too. So really the definition of wealth became a holistic freedom focus around just having time to do the things that we love and that we're passionate about, and focusing on things that we prioritize, which for me is my family, and I'm sure for a lot of moms too, is just even being able to not have to worry about money. I think that takes such a big load off, and you free up that mind space to really focus on things of like, what's our purpose here on earth? We have our priorities with our kids, but also there's a greater impact to the world and to the community. So I feel like for me, at least, if I wasn't worrying about the day to day, like how am I going to afford putting food on the table or putting a roof overhead? If those thoughts just were no longer existent, that mind space can go to impact focused thoughts. How can I bring impact to my nuclear family, but also not just my nuclear family, but also to others around us in our community and even beyond that? So that's my definition of wealth. It's really changed dramatically. All the fancy things. I mean, those are just like extra things. It's like, I mean, it's entirely okay to treat ourselves to sometimes those things, but it's just like, wealth means so much more than that. So That's my
Oh, I
definition of
just
wealth.
love it. I love what you said there because I had the same similar reactions, right? Like a wealthy person was mean and greedy and awful and it's just not true. It's just not true. But what you talked about there, time freedom, I think that's something that's so important to me as as a mother of 5 children. And I need that time freedom so that I can create very specific experiences for them before they leave, right? Like, it's because our time with our children is very short. Once they hit teenage years, I mean, oh my gosh, you're like, what just happened? They're about all out there. But also the other thing that you said was purpose. So when you live paycheck to paycheck, you're right. Your mind is just consumed with how do I pay this bill? How do I, prioritize the bills and okay, now I can only pay 4 of the 5 bills this week, so which ones am I gonna pay? That takes up so much headspace, and you've gotta break out of that. You've gotta break out of that and get to the point where you can free your mind to actually fulfill your purpose on the earth, and I love that you talked about, having that purpose. That's so important to be able to discover, and you just can't discover it when you are consumed with fear and worry all the time about money, because money is not the goal. Purpose and impact is definitely the goal here. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that. And I think that kind of leads into, we're talking about money mindset, right? So I know I have struggled with a lot of different money mindset issues and trying to work through those because we learn about money growing up kind of, but not really, right? Because there's no formal education out there about how to manage your money and what are the things you have to do. And so I've been trying to be very intentional with my own children about teaching them, but you know money mindset is a really big challenge. So tell me about one of the mindsets that you had about money that you had to work through to be able to get to where you are.
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned prior that, I had a negative view of money and having a lot of it. And I did this exercise actually with one of my first mentors in real estate. She had me kind of think about my mindset in money about money and kind of work backwards in terms of degrees of freedom of like, why do I think that way? What is it that prompted me to think why it's negative and really work through that and then kind of go backwards and like, oh, well, what about where did I hear that from? And just kind of keep going back to kind of try to pinpoint like where it is in my life that gave me that negative connotation towards money. And I think for me, it was like growing up, maybe it's the way my parents portrayed money because we didn't grow up with a lot of money. They worked really hard. My parents were immigrants. So they it's funny I say this, but they came from Taiwan and they immigrated here. They worked really hard. They came with very little and they didn't believe in the American financial system, like the economy or anything like that. They never took out loans. They worked hard for every dollar. They earned every dollar and they spent every dollar for even things like houses. They never took out mortgages. So they saved very aggressively to buy things in
Wow.
full. Yes, and they taught me that only buy what you can afford. If you can't afford it, even if you could take out a loan, don't buy it. So I was living with that. Like everything that I had was just things that I can afford and that I was comfortable with getting. So, I had to break past those barriers. And just recently being in this world, did I finally see the impact of leverage, which I had never knew anything about. But I know that's a little bit different. It's kind of like the next level of wealth and money. So I think for me, it's really just kind of working past it. And it's not just about the topic of money. It's really anything in life that I, have a negative connotation towards. It's really just like taking a moment to think about it. Why do I think a certain way about that and working backwards to find the source of it and really just trying to find a solution and just work through those thoughts.
Mhm. So once you figured out, you did the whys. There's a really great exercise called the 5 whys.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself a question and then you say, well, why? And then you answer it and then ask why again. And it just makes you go on a really deep level to
Yeah.
fully understand kind of where your thoughts and ideas are coming from.
Yeah.
So I love that you worked through that exercise. So since when you worked through that exercise and then you kind of uncovered the source of where your mindset was coming from, what did you do next to like break through that and to work through that so that now you could be free to actually use leverage, right? And leverage is just simply means getting a mortgage on a house instead of paying for it in cash, right? So how did you work through that to actually get there?
It was a lot of education. So once I figured out and unveiled kind of my lack of knowledge about something and hence the negative approach or the negative view towards it, I just started educating myself to really understand, oh, well, why are other people, doing it that way? Why, like, what's the advantage of taking out loans and mortgages on a large asset? And I started to discover that there were way more advantages than disadvantages to it. And so I filled my time that I had, the free time, with podcasts, with other people talking about different strategies. And it wasn't that I was following exactly what they were saying. I was just collecting all the different approaches and perspectives about money and leverage, and just kind of teased out my own understanding of it from everything that I learned across the board, a variety of approaches. So that's kind of the step that I took. I think education is huge. I think a lot of times, at least I speak for myself, that I think negatively towards something because I don't understand it. And then once you do understanding, you're like, oh, okay. So it's really trying to take another perspective and understanding, and really playing devil's advocate too does help, but just asking that question, well, like, why? Why is it done this way? Why is it done that way? And what are the advantages and disadvantages? And that tends to help.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, that was super profound what you said that, sometimes we automatically take a negative approach to an idea, right? So an idea presents itself and our brains are wired to keep ourselves safe, right? So, for you growing up, safety meant paying cash for everything, everything, right?
Right.
And there was no safety in using a loan because that was risky and dangerous. And
Mhm.
so when the idea comes that, oh, actually you should use a loan, you can do much better using mortgages, your brain automatically rejects it because it's like, no, that's not safe. Right. And so it's really interesting how we have that automatic approach to life because our brains just want to keep us safe.
Right.
But if we can use education, like you said, you just dive into it and you really need to fully educate yourself on these ideas and topics and things about, and it's not even just about money and building wealth, right? Like it could be anything. It could be health, it could be the environment, it could be cars, for heaven's sakes. Like anything,
Yeah.
children's education. If you really dive in and just do the work to educate yourself, I think that is huge. That is definitely huge.
Huge. Yes.
So speaking of education, so I know that none of us really grew up being well educated on money concepts. I mean, I think our parents tried and they tried to give us as much as they could, but in terms of like fully understanding how money flows and how money works, that it's really tricky and there's no formal financial education. So tell me
Mhm.
about, so for your kids, what ages are your kids first, and then what are some ideas that you have about teaching them about money?
Yes. So my two boys, they're ages 5 and 3. I'm still figuring this out because they're pretty young. They don't really understand yet the concept of money. I think my 5-year-old is a little bit starting to realize that things actually cost money to get. So I'm figuring this out. I feel like I have a lot to learn from you. Yeah, since your kids are a bit older. But I think the same thing. I'm probably going to be reaching out to other moms and parents in this space to be like, "Hey, how do I do this?"
Yeah,
And
yeah.
educating like the same way that we read parenting books, um, and even like newborn, how to take care of a newborn kind of thing, like those kinds of things. I think we're at the next step of understanding and teaching money to the kids. So
No, I love it. I love it.
yeah, it's
Well,
the next
stay
step.
tuned, everyone, because I have a full series planned to teach about teaching children about money and kind of what we have done in our journey. And I'll give you a little precursor. So at age 5 is when we started them with their on their money journey, because that's about the age when they can start understanding money a little bit, right? And
Right.
but it's all tangible, right? So
Mhm.
the at age 5 is when they need to have like dollars in their hands and cents and that, and they're learning to count and they're learning
Yeah.
to all those things. So that's but yeah, I have a whole series planned. So stay tuned for that coming up in
I
the podcast later
That's
on.
awesome. I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be really good. Yeah, so let's dive into, your preferred method of investing. So tell me, how did you really learn about investing and when did you actually start investing your money?
So as I graduated from college and then went into the workforce, I just invested like everyone else did, paycheck contributions and all of that. And that was the extent of my understanding of investing. Back in 2008, when everything crashed, I had just graduated. I graduated college in 2008. So I dabbled a little bit in the stock market. I even told my parents, I'm like, "Oh, if you have extra money, let's try to get something in real estate," but I didn't know a lot about it. So that didn't go anywhere really. But I did invest a little bit in the stock market back then when it was low, and I didn't really understand real estate. I was an accidental landlord because I had a few properties that I held on to. I bought my first home in 2010 just because I couldn't afford to rent at that time. It was actually
Yeah.
less to buy. And at that time, with the Obama administration, he was giving the first time homebuyers credit a tax credit. So I was like, oh, this is maybe a good thing. I'll just buy something. And I was living in a pretty inexpensive area. So that property I kept for a while and started renting it out just short term. I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I really just kind of made up a rent number and had someone from church who was looking for a place to stay and just rented it out to her. But it wasn't until 2019 when I was ready to exit my job. I started doing some research. At that time, my husband, he does still have his own company now, but we were paying loads of taxes every year. Every quarter, actually, we had to make quarterly payments to the IRS. And all of my money that I was making was paying his taxes. And I'm like, this is not sustainable. Why am I working just to pay for your taxes? It was very significant. So every time I was writing that check out to the IRS, I'm like crying a little bit. This is
Oh,
a lot of money. So
awful.
it was awful. Yeah, terrible. So we did some research. We landed on Tom Wheelwright's educational course called Wealth Ability and started learning about ways to offset our taxes. And everything pointed to real estate investing. And so I was like, okay, this is something. And that's when I started learning more about real estate investing. And I was like, whoa, we can do so much and I can offset your taxes and not have to work my job, my W-2 job. And we could build legacy wealth for our family. And I just kept learning after that. And after every webinar or every just podcast, I just my eyes were open, both me and my husband actually. But unfortunately, he has his business that he has to run, so he's not as much involved in real estate investing. It's mostly me running it for our family. But I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much to this. There's so many benefits that really not a lot of people talk about. More so now. I think more so people are talking about it now, but it's like real estate investing is amazing. And so that's kind of how I started and just kept learning more and more about it. And when I decided in 2020 to exit to officially exit my job. I had already learned about real estate a bit, took a couple courses, had a mentor, and was ready to pull the trigger. So right after I resigned, we actually sold our house. We had a lot of equity in it. We could have rented it, but I think we were ready to sell it. And then we purchased two family. So now we're house hacking. And then with the extra equity, we invested in four rental properties. They were following the Burr strategy, and also invested in about two or three passive LP opportunities in syndications. So kind of spread it all around. And
Nice.
that was a huge monumental year, the second half of 2020, when we were doing all this stuff, also renovating ourselves too. We had three renovations going on at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, so we jumped in, full force into investing in real estate and have never looked back since. And it's been quite an amazing journey. It's been life-changing. I think, it's really pushed us to change our mindset about a lot of things. And I feel like we feel more free now. Even though we're not quite at our goal yet, we know we're well on our way. We're headed in that direction and we're feeling really good about everything. And it's really changed a lot for us as a family and our lifestyle. And it's just been amazing.
Wow, Christine, that's amazing. All in 1 year.
Yeah.
You just like totally jumped in and took it and ran with it. I am so impressed about what you guys are doing and the fact that you're house hacking now, right? Even with your family. I think a lot of people I love the house hacking strategy.
Love
That's how we
it.
started out,
Yeah.
and it was exactly the right way. And it's actually my number one advice for anybody brand new to real estate. I'm like, you need a house hack. That's that's the step one, house hack, right? Because
Right.
you got to turn your own living situation into an asset instead of a liability. And I love that you guys are doing it. We're not doing it anymore, but we're trying to figure out ways like we might build another, small, tiny home on our property and be able to
Yeah.
rent that out too. And so there's lots of creative ways that you can, house hack and turn your own property into an asset. But I love it. I love that you guys are just going for it and that so you actually chose both the active and the passive route. So talk to me about that. Why did you like go both ways and then which way are you enjoying the most?
Yes. So that was very intentional because when I started investing in real estate, I actually had my eye on syndications and multifamily already, but I felt like it was too big and way too daunting to start. In hindsight, I probably could have just worked with a coach or a mentor who was already very skilled at that and just jumped into that. But I actually don't regret going into the single families first because I got to learn all the foundations of doing everything from start to finish at a small scale and as a practice run for me with the four properties that I have currently. And it was well worth it. So I wanted to be active. I wanted to learn from start to finish, from acquisitions all the way to going full cycle and refinancing my singles, and also learn from the big players doing the larger commercial properties too. So I wanted to learn from afar as being a passive investor in LP and just really understanding like how are they running their operations? How are they communicating with investors? Like what is their brand? All of that. So I was just observing from the sidelines and got to even create a relationship with them where if I had questions, I didn't feel shy to reach out to them, and be like, hey, why are you doing it this way? Or like, I noticed maybe this distribution was a little bit late. Why was that kind of thing? And just asking questions. And for me, I was learning and absorbing kind of that side of the business. So I got to do both. I think from a learning perspective, it was really awesome to do both. And also from a personal finance standpoint, because I knew I only had so much time to do that piece. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
That was a full-time job. And I know you understand too. I see your renovations, which have been really awesome.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, super involved. Takes a ton of time. I wanted to scale from the get-go. I knew I couldn't just buy properties one at a time because I feel like the opportunity cost, it's like not as ideal. It's just like, put in so much work and then you maybe get a few $100s in cash flow after that. But it was really, I feel like the learning experience was invaluable. And I think that's the most value out of that experience. But I just wanted to also multiply that depreciation benefit. So I got that from being an LP. Also the extra cash flow, I got that from distributions as an LP. And all of that was just bonus. It was icing on the cake where I didn't have to do any work, but I still got in, a little bit more cash flow at the end of the day, just because I invested also in those passive opportunities. So I thought it was a really great blend to be able to do both.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you're doing both. I'm the same, right? So I like to be active because real estate's fun
It
and
is.
a thing to do.
Yes.
And I love that, we can go and turn something ugly into something beautiful and make money doing it. Like that's amazing. But I also want my own money working hard for me and not all my time having to work
Yes.
hard. Yeah, as we speak today, our family's in the middle of our next family flip, and we are working very, very hard, and we are there, and we do all the renovations ourselves, like almost all of them. We hire out couple of things that we can't really do, but yeah, all my kids are there, and we're just working like crazy. It's super fun to have like a project like that to do, but also it's not sustainable. You can't just be doing all the work yourselves and build the type of wealth that you need to build, right? Like it's just not sustainable. So it's a really great project to do once in a while, but
Yeah.
passive is definitely the way to go. The way to go. Like you can
Absolutely.
preserve your time free. You have professionals running the project for you, so that you don't have to make any of those decisions, and you don't have to stress about the property and what's going on, and deal with the problems and challenges of tenants. But you get to invest in real estate, and if you do it right, and if you do it with the right teams, then you're well taken care of, right? And you get to be part of creating an impact for the community, for that apartment complex, right? And if they're doing their projects right and really caring for the tenants and the residents that live there, it's a beautiful thing. It's a really a beautiful thing. I love it.
Yeah, it is amazing. Amazing. And I love that you're doing it with your family, the active part and the flips. It's so cool. Those are like definitely hashtag goals.
Yeah, well, your 5-year-old can wield a hammer, right? Just give him a hammer.
I don't know. I'm scared
Well,
he'll
on
drop it
demo
on his
day.
foot.
Well, yeah, there's that.
We'll wait
Yeah,
till 6. Maybe 6 is a little bit better.
yeah. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. So tell me, Christine, this podcast, it's really important to me that we give out some really actionable steps to our listeners so that they can basically follow in our footsteps, and because I want to leave a path that others can easily follow. And so I'm excited that we get to clear this path as we go along, and then other people can just kind of come along and enjoy it and follow. So tell me, what are some actionable steps? Like if you could give one actionable step today to someone that they could implement right away, what would you say?
Well, I would say that the listener, you are doing the right thing by listening to this podcast because that is the first step. And Camilla is awesome at providing the actual step-by-step roadmap to get there. So that's really awesome. And I would say next is find more podcasts like this too, and just learn, like I mentioned, different perspectives about growing wealth and money and just hearing everything about it. Even there are some, big time hustlers out there who are very aggressive, even like if that's not, I know for me, it's not exactly the same approach I want to take, but it's still good to kind of learn and just hear about what their perspective is and where their mind is. So just learning all the many different perspectives through podcasts is really great, especially for busy moms to kind of listen to in the background during like housework and stuff like that we could do it passively. And there's like many different books out there about wealth. So like Think and Grow Rich is kind of a classic one. Robert Kiyosaki, I think almost everyone started with the purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are really great foundational first steps, I think, to learning about it. And from there, I think also network with people who are in this space too. Just start asking questions. A lot of them will give recommendations about what books they're reading too. And that really helps. I think it's just continue to educate and feed yourself the knowledge, and it'll just click and just grow.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to tease out something you said. So you talked about how there's like really big hustlers out there, but that's maybe not the way that you want to grow your own business and investing and wealth. So let's talk about that for a minute because I mean the title of my podcast is Quiet Wealth, right? Because it's not about being loud and loud and proud. I'm an introvert and I prefer just having, one-on-one conversations about things and having real meaningful ways to grow. And of course, I build my business. It's important for me to share this knowledge, which is why I'm launching a podcast, even though it's uncomfortable to do podcasting sometimes.
You're doing
But
awesome.
it's important for people to hear from others who are maybe not embracing the hustle mentality. So talk to me about what's your perspective on how can you build a business without hustling? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, I think to build a business, you have to have some degree of hustle. I mean, it's just having that motivation to kind of keep going really does help. I mean, for me, it's like it's family. It's like that's my first priority. Where I there will be times where I do have to drop everything work related just to care for my boys because either they're sick or, anything might happen. It's really all about like priority, I feel like. And it's okay. I'm not saying hustling is bad. It's not. It just really depends on what your individual priority is. Some people I feel like everyone has a goal, right? Everyone has a goal. Some people get there much faster. And then when they get there, they're like, oh, I want to keep going. So I feel like that's kind of the really aggressive hustle mentality. And that's fine. If that's their priority, great for them. But then there are others like myself where I do have a goal and I would like to get there as quickly as possible. But I also know there are other priorities that take precedence. And, I will get there, but it's just going to be slower and that's okay too. So it's really having peace with that thought. Sometimes I do get impatient and I set my quarterly goals and even within that I set monthly goals just to be like, I need to do XYZ. And sometimes there are months, like for example, we just got through like 5 weeks of both kids being sick back and forth
Oh,
and like back to back sicknesses. Even my little one was spent a day at the ER because we had a
no.
pneumonia scare. So it wasn't COVID, thank God, but actually it was like a slew of many other viruses that are out there that are getting stronger. So as a mom, you just have to take a step back sometimes and be like, it's okay. I'm moving a little slower. I still have my goals. Maybe I didn't reach all of them this month or this quarter, but I'll make up for it next quarter or next month. And that's okay. It's really just finding peace and really prioritizing what's the most important.
Yeah, I love it. My grandma, her famous quote was, "Good enough is good enough." Right?
Yes, I love
And
that.
she just like she would say that all the time that, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be doing everything. You don't have to be like get doing it all. And
Mhm.
I think one of the myths, of moms who also build businesses and said, oh, people look at us, and I get this question all the time. Oh my gosh, how do you do it all? And
Yeah.
my simple answer is I don't. I don't do it all. And I don't put that pressure on myself to do it all either, right? Like there's no reason to put that mega pressure on yourself because then you think about, well, what example are you giving to your children, right? Are you showing your children that you have to work all hours of the day and night to be successful? That's not the image that I really am after. It's not the image that I want to portray. I want
Yeah.
to portray that yes, we work hard and by golly, our family does work hard, right? Especially when we're doing like flips, where
Yeah.
they're working for hours at a time, physically laboring, right? So my kids get that hard work is important, but they also get that it's okay to relax and hang out and watch a movie together or, go on a walk or, do all
Mhm.
these things and then take big breaks too. Like we could take a whole month off and just go do things together. And that's okay and good, right? To build memories because you can't just be working all the time. I think that's one of the
Right.
reasons I left my corporate job is because that's the mentality in
Yeah.
corporate is that you work all the time and you only get a finite number of days to take off. And I
Mhm.
hated that. I hated that about corporate, that, that they could control how many days that I could and could not work. And so it's just much better having that freedom for real.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to end with one last question, and that would just be kind of what's your advice to a woman who's starting out on, maybe she's like hit the point in her corporate career where she's like, I need to be doing something more, right? Like, I can't just
Mhm.
rely on my 401k. I don't think it's going to get me there. Or my, regular financial advisor, the stock market is just going crazy. I need to do something more, but I have no idea where to start and what to do. What advice would you give her?
So this is a little bit of a tangent, but I was at that point too. And I went on LinkedIn. I just typed in real estate investors. Think again, it's about educating yourself and even networking, talking with people. There's a lot of people in this space, and I feel like Camilla's a great starting point. Talk with Camilla. Feel free to talk with me. There's definitely no pressure with investing with us or in real estate in general, but I come from a place of education and hopefully bringing value to others just to kind of like open the box to other alternative assets that we can invest in and as busy professionals and busy moms too. So it's all about learning and networking. I think LinkedIn is a great place just to start networking with people. Once you know someone, you'll know like literally everyone because everyone's connected
True.
in this world. And then just start asking questions, schedule time with them. If they're local, I don't know, schedule a meeting and just start learning more about the different spaces. It's not just real estate. There's so many other different assets out there from like energy to small business, things that you can invest in outside of the traditional stocks and bonds, mutual funds. And it's kind of exciting. I feel like when a woman and a mom gets involved with the finances and is a partner to their spouses, or even if it's just them that's like, managing everything, it's fun. You get to see a bigger picture about like, finances for the family, and it's a cool place to be.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I totally agree. I totally agree. It's just very empowering for women to really take control and to, and you don't have to control everything, but to be in the know, right? Be in the
Yes.
know and be able to
Right.
help make those decisions. Very empowering and exciting. So
Yeah.
Christine, thank you so much. I so appreciate you coming on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the listeners. I think they're just going to love this episode. So I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, Camilla, for having me. It's such an honor to be on your show.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thanks for joining. So excited to have you here. Again, we'll be back same time, same place. Bye for now.